Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. Today's webinar is part of our Let's Talk series, and our topic today is Live Purposefully, 9 Steps to a Meaningful and Valued Life. My name is Anna Tan, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I am the Be Well Program Coordinator for WorkWell NYC, and I am joined by our guest panelists. Please join me in welcoming Carrie Simon, Associate Deputy Director for the Employee Assistance Program, and Ebony Brown, a counselor at the Employee Assistance Program. Today's presentation is brought to you by WorkWell NYC, the city's worksite wellness program. Our mission is to empower 380,000 city employees to live healthy, active lifestyles at work, at home, and beyond. We are here for you with health and well-being resources, programs, and support to help you move more, eat well, be well, and take action to prevent disease, no matter where you are on your health journey. Before we begin, I'd like to note that the webinar slides, recording, and additional resources will be shared with all of the attendees after the webinar ends. At the end of today's presentation, the panelists Carrie and Ebony will be able to take some questions. Please use the chat box to submit your questions to us, as we are very excited to hear from you. Let's get started. Today's agenda is as follows. Define acceptance and commitment therapy, review the 9 steps to reduce anxiety and stress, learn where to get support when you need it, and support your coworkers with the Let's Talk pledge. And now I will hand it off to Carrie to talk about acceptance and commitment therapy.
Hi, everyone. So basically, acceptance and commitment therapy, its premise is to create a rich and meaningful life while accepting the pain that inevitably goes with it. It's a little different from what we may think, in therapy we want like depression to go away, or in anxiety we want it to go away. But what the research really shows and what life really shows is they're going to come up, and sometimes they're not going to be the most extreme relief that we would really want. So what acceptance and commitment therapy does, and we're going to take you through the steps to show you how to get there, is how you can take effective action that is guided by your deepest values while being fully present. And that way, when you are in pain or in suffering, it would actually be, it will make a less of an impact when you know you're in line with your values and doing things that are important and meaningful to you. So we're going to take you through those steps. Ebony's going to take you through the first couple of steps, and then I'm going to follow by that. We're going to work together. If you have any questions through them too, we're going to field them throughout. So please feel free to ask any questions through it. We want to make this as clear and meaningful to you as possible. So we're going to first watch a video to give you a little explanation.
It often seems like we've got a struggle switch at the back of our mind. And as soon as an uncomfortable emotion, a painful feeling or memory shows up, it's like the struggle switch goes on and we start to struggle with it. So let's suppose anxiety shows up. A very common, painful emotion that we all get to experience. Anxiety shows up, the struggle switch goes on. Oh, it's anxiety. I don't like anxiety. I want to get rid of my anxiety. Now I've got anxiety about my anxiety. So it's getting bigger. With the struggle switch on, I now get, oh, my anxiety is getting bigger. How do I get rid of my anxiety? Now I've got even more anxiety. With the struggle switch on, I may then get angry about my anxiety. Why does this anxiety keep showing up? I hate this anxiety. Then I might even start to feel sad about my anger. Oh, is this my life? Oh, and then I may start to feel guilty about my sadness about my anger. Oh, how pathetic am I when there's starving kids in Africa? So with my struggle switch on, my emotions get amplified. I've now got guilt about my sadness, about my anger, about my anxiety, And that kind of amplification of emotions gives them more impact and influence over my life and often gets me bogged down or pulls me into self-defeating behaviors. Now, what happens if I can switch off the struggle switch? With the struggle switch off, anxiety shows up, and it's not that I like it or want it or approve of it, it's just I'm not going to struggle with it. I'm not going to invest my time, energy, and effort in struggling with this anxiety. Instead, I'm going to invest it in doing meaningful, life-enhancing activities, such as spending quality time with my friends and family or playing with my kids. Now, with the struggle switch off, the anxiety is free to move. It may get higher, it may get lower, it may move quickly, it may move slowly, but the point is it's free to move. It doesn't get amplified by all of these other emotions which make it kind of bigger and stickier and make it hang around for a lot longer. So there's no such thing as a life without anxiety. It shows up for all of us. But when anxiety shows up and the struggle switch is off, it's so much easier to live with than when the struggle switch is on.
Hi, now I will now take you through the first steps of the 9 leading to a meaningful and valued life. Step 1, being able to recognize that our minds are built to help us to stop us from doing the things that are the most uncomfortable. So when we are taking these steps, we want to recognize that our thoughts, what our thoughts are, and how these thoughts can impact us as we go through them. We want to recognize our thoughts as words or sounds. An example being thinking about things that come up for us, or seeing our thoughts as a passing car, the next car on the highway. We'll now go through an action step on what stressful and anxious thoughts might you have right now. An example being, you may be thinking about making dinner after work, doing our laundry, and we want to take this moment just to acknowledge those as words and sounds. And for me, thinking about cooking, it sounds like it's very hot. Thinking about doing laundry sounds very heavy. And we want them to come like clouds in the sky. So we imagine these things as we're looking at them, but we're just recognizing them for what they are. Step 2 is for us to observe. We want to observe our thoughts as just a participant. We don't want to make any judgment towards it. We just want to notice what is there. And our goal is to notice the thoughts versus the person who observes the thoughts. Like step 1, we just want to see it passing by. We don't want to make any judgment or add any context to it outside of the initial thought. And so we want to know that we aren't our thoughts, so that we can have a better grasp on the next few steps we're going to go through. We also want to imagine when we are observing them. I love the analogy of being in a pool and seeing our thoughts on little beach balls floating around us, that we're just there, and the feelings are also just surrounding us. For this activity, I want to observe our thoughts as if we are friendly scientists encountering a new phenomenon. We don't want to make any judgment, because as a friendly scientist, we aren't there to interfere with it. We aren't there to destroy it. We're just there to observe it, to see how it shows up for us. We want to observe this with curiosity and try to find out as much as we can about what is happening for us. Like the analogy I used earlier, we're sitting in the pool with the beach balls, and we want to just watch the beach balls as they are floating around us, see how they move, but not to make any judgments, not to push them away or try to get them out of the pool with us.
Ebony, someone in the comments section made a really good, kind of named it, and he called it healthy detachments.
Yes.
A very good point. So it's like you're almost becoming, instead of saying, I am sad, you're saying I'm having thoughts of sadness, right? So it's a healthy detachment. You don't become those moods or feelings, just like you said, like the balls in the pool. It's a healthy way of separating yourself from those.
That is very true. For step 3, it is a way for us to connect with our physical bodies. Our bodies can hold a lot of emotions and feelings and respond to those in various ways as well. So we want to try some ways to do some grounding techniques to help us to be connected with the feelings, but also helping to alleviate those feelings as well. So for this activity, as listed below, we want to slowly push our feet into the ground. So getting into a comfortable position, you know, sitting upright in a chair, or if you're more comfortable even laying on the floor, just making sure that you're connecting your body and being able to feel the different sensations. So feeling your feet, how does it feel when you push it into the ground slowly? How does it feel when you press your fingers together, or even rest them like on your thighs or legs while you're pressing your feet? It's also helpful to slowly stretch our arms and neck and shrug our shoulders. Even now, as we are looking at the computers, we may be slouched. We want to make sure we can sit up straight, and taking some conscious and slow breaths throughout the day. I mean, we do this involuntarily, but we want to have some conscious, deep breathing while we go throughout our day as well. You can also breathe in for a slow 4, you know, pause for 1 second, and then also breathe out for 4 or 8 for a longer exhale.
Ebony, someone else had a question. What is a good way to deal with mild pain, such as allergy, itchiness, or a tooth problem? Is there a way to keep it in perspective? Something that I thought of is what you're walking through is, and we'll get to the next part too, is when you're aware of the pain and not the pain, then you can feel a little less suffering. I mean, sometimes we can't get rid of the pain, and pain management and ACT really works well together, but I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that as well.
Yeah, like noticing that you are in pain is part of it. And, you know, you can take action steps to know how do we successfully, you know, alleviate that if it's actually just like physical symptom or like a psychosomatic symptom as well, because sometimes people do have jaw pains as a result of the stress, I think, as well. So making sure to stretch out those areas, I think, is important as well to try to alleviate and release that tension.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So for step 4, it's about making space. We talked a little bit about noticing things, but we also want to consciously make space for the thoughts and feelings that we're acknowledging and to accept them with kindness. These things are showing up in us, and we can't, like I said, where the beach balls are around us, we're not going to push them away or try to push them underwater, but we do want to put words to these feelings. You can use phrases like, I'm noticing I'm anxious. I'm noticing I'm scared. I'm having a feeling of being frustrated or irritated, or even I'm having thoughts about being overwhelmed. So as we start to put words to the feelings, again, we're noticing them, we're making space for them. We're not saying that we like these sensations or these feelings, but we are saying that these feelings are showing up for us right now, and we want to allow them to have space until we can find another way to kind of go through and resolve them. So when we think about unpleasant thoughts or feelings that we may be experiencing, we can think about being anxious or just being overwhelmed with our responsibilities and tasks, and how do we create space for it and say silently to ourselves, I don't like this feeling, but I have room for it as well. And so in that aspect, we allow that feeling to exist and we make peace with it, that it is, we are not it. It may be a part of us, but it's not the whole part of our being we're not only anxiety, we're not only frustrated, but it allows us to make peace with that feeling.
Okay, so this is my turn. So basically what Ebony just went through is how we can develop a different relationship to our thoughts and feelings. Just like what the video is showing, sometimes we have anxiety, then we have anxiety about anxiety, and then we feel guilty and shame that we can't control it. So those steps are, how do we have a different way in which we look at our emotions and in which we look at our thoughts and have a different healthy relationship with them. And the next steps that are part of this model is to reflect on your core values. So like I said before, I lost my page. Like I said before, part of what the treatment is about your values. And basically, those are the principles in your life that give you meaning. Sometimes it's hard to kind of grasp that. So there's two kind of examples of what I like to use to figure out what your values are. So think of a couple of things. What do you want to stand for in the face of this crisis? Very specific to this, right? And what sort of person you want to be. On another level, think about 3 people that you most admire or that you would identify as a hero. And then in your head, think of why. And a lot of times the characteristics of them are something that you find important and that actually may be in line with your values. The other thing to do after this webinar is just go throughout your day in the next couple of days and without judgment, observe yourself and observe the choices you make. And when you make those choices, think about why that's important to you. That's another way to kind of figure out what motivates you, what motivates and guides your actions. And that way, when you're in the face of distress or suffering, you can reflect back on what's important to you so you don't lose sight of that. So again, just how are your actions moving your life forward in the direction, finding out what's meaningful for you, and are they in line with your values? So with that, we all have goals, we all have things that we want to do. And when you want to follow through with your values, that you have to set a goal. So what are the simple ways to look after yourself, your loved ones? What are supportive deeds? And then what are your goals that are in line with your values? And the technique that I use and that I help other people use, it's a very simple acronym, and actually the ACT model uses it too. It's called the SMART goal technique. So it's an easy acronym to remember. So the SMART goal technique is this. The S is for something specific, simple, and sensible. You want to have the goal to be very, very specific. I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow at 8 p.m. because I know it's simple. It's sensible because I know I can get there. And then the M is measurable and meaningful. So is this goal measurable? Can I say, okay, I did this, this, and that? And is it meaningful? And another M could be, is it motivating? So there are times where we have goals that we not quite want to do, but we know they're in line with our values, which then makes it more motivating. And then the A is for achievable. Is this achievable? We all have a lot of dreams and goals that we do want to do, but we also don't want to start out with ones that are actually hard to do, because if we repeatedly do goals that we're not able to get, we're going to cause more suffering and distress. So you really want to make it achievable. And then the R is relevant. Is it realistic? Kind of it relates the achievable to. Is it realistic? Is it reasonable? And then the T is it's time bound. Like I know when I need to do this by. So those letters really help you guide your values and your goals and connect them to success. So if you haven't already, as I was talking, think about a goal that you have in mind. Think about how it aligns with your values, and briefly kind of go through Can you make it specific? Is it meaningful? Can you make it attainable? And is it relevant? And is there a timetable, right? You can take that through to see if it meets all that. And then if you go off course, that's okay. You're doing the best. And there's times where we realize, oh, this isn't in line with my values. And how do I make it in line with my values? Or why isn't it in line with my values? And once you kind of do that introspective, you might find that there is this level of suffering or pain because something's not in line with your values.
Carrie,
yes,
we had a question I thought would be good with our goals. Do you have any suggestions on setting healthy boundaries?
Healthy boundaries in specific to?
In terms of when someone's resistant, when someone guilt trips you for setting your boundaries, how to uphold them.
So the goal is to set healthy boundaries around people?
Yes.
Well, again, I would go back to thinking about what's important to you. So if someone is not respecting your boundaries, you obviously have a value around that, right? There's something that's not sitting well with you. And not knowing the information, and this is something certainly EAP can walk people through, all of our staff is actually trained in this model, is what else is important to you. So is communication, is healthy relationships, is what is it about this person that isn't in line with your boundaries. So there's other elements to boundaries that could be incorporated in this model. Any other questions, Ebony, before I move forward?
I'm going to answer directly. Someone wants the acronym for SMART again, and I'll read through and let you know the next.
Okay, great. Okay, so we went through the thoughts and feelings, different relationship. We went through how to identify your values, and then we went through goal setting. And now it's about, all of that comes in with checking in with yourself, like on the daily, like checking in with yourself and making room for the uncomfortable feelings and being kind to yourself. Ebony went through that. And know that they're actually all gonna show up. So sometimes, and I know for myself too, I'm like, oh, I'm having a great couple of days. And then all of a sudden I'm sad and then I'm angry. Because I'm like, almost as if I'm surprised that I have a negative feeling. If we embrace the idea that they're just part of life, that in and of itself will, just like the video, turn off the struggle switch, right? And because you can't stop them from arising, but you can open up and make room for them and say like, oh, okay, here's a normal feeling. It's uncomfortable. I'm having thoughts of this. It's uncomfortable, but you're allowing a different relationship so it doesn't impact you so much and still allows you to lead your life in a meaningful way. So this is, for everyone here in the webinar, are you willing to make the room for the difficult feelings? And are you willing to try not to struggle against difficult feelings? It's a very different approach. There's some way in which we want to control our feelings, right? It's a very different way to look at it. And it does work, but there's times where we want to be able to control our feelings. If you are open to the willingness to make room for them, you will see profound changes in your relationship with your feelings, and thus relationship with the world and other people. And then you're able to make more effective action in order to do things that matter to you.
Carrie, we have another question.
Mm-hmm.
What are our suggestions for removing the feeling of stuckness? Finding that I just am not wanting to set goals at the risk of adding more work to a busy schedule in life.
Mm-hmm. Can you reread that to me again?
What are our suggestions for removing the feeling of being stuck and having the thoughts that we don't want to set goals at the risk of adding more work to a busy schedule and life responsibilities?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. I'm sure a lot of people feel that kind of frozen. You just be with that right now. Like when you feel, okay, I'm having the feeling of stuckness. I'm not at that step where, you may have all these other goals on your plate, but just being aware that you're feeling stuck and just look at that and look at what that's having you feel and be present. And all what you could do is just evaluate all the things that are on your plate already and your goals, and say, okay, how do my values align with them, right? Because if you're feeling stuck, I think there's a good time to reevaluate what's already on your plate per se. And if they all make sense, they all make sense. But there's times where you may see that certain things that you have on your goal plate per se may not be exactly what is important to you. Okay, so this is a great kind of 2 words that ACT has come up with. It's another way that you can identify what when you're getting comfortable with your feelings, and identify whether it's called clean discomfort or dirty discomfort. Now, clean discomfort is the feeling of security despite having physical and emotional discomfort, right? It's exactly what this is going through. It's like, okay, I am having feelings of sadness, I am struggling, or I'm stuck, but I'm aware of it and I'm accepting it, and I know this is, this shall pass. That's clean. Dirty is when you're struggling with it, right? Your struggle switch is on. It's the feeling that arises when everything is difficult and you don't know how to manage it, and you have anxiety about anxiety, right? So that's another way to ask yourself, is this clean discomfort or dirty discomfort? It gives you a tool to evaluate where you are in this process. Yeah, so, today, right now, or after this, practice it. Everything behavioral, right? Like they say, it takes 21 days to create a new habit. It takes 3 months to break one. So, after this, just practice with the emotional discomfort and say, is this clean? Is this dirty? Maybe I'll just do these steps that we learned in the webinar. Reach out to us and we can teach you them again. But just remind yourself, even if you get stuck, that you're safe and your feelings are natural, and then you can combat them. And in 9 is always a step that should be in every kind of model, is that we are humans who need help and support, and whoever that is, then that's important to you. So resources could be reaching out to mental health professionals like us at the EAP. It could be your social networks, could be friends, family members, chosen family, anyone that you feel safe and comfortable sharing your feelings. And if you can offer support to others, let them know that you can, and be a resource for others just as that they can be for you. So, considering your life again to turn for support. We actually hold every week on Monday nights at 8 p.m. a relaxation technique group. And it's with Michael Contreras. He's a wonderful creative arts therapist with a long history of experience with relaxation techniques. And every Monday night at 8 p.m., he'll take you through a particular technique. We have the information here on this screen, and we also have flyers that we can send out to you after this webinar.
All right, thank you, Carrie and Ebony, for presenting us with the 9 steps to live meaningfully. These are all very actionable that we can certainly incorporate into our daily lives. Before we wrap up, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the Let's Talk Mental Health Anti-Stigma campaign. Many of you may be familiar with the statistic that approximately 1 in 5 New Yorkers experience a mental health challenge each year. As such, the mission of Let's Talk is to eliminate mental health stigma in the City of New York workforce by creating supportive workplaces and building resilience in employees. Let's Talk aims to do this by promoting education, awareness, and knowledge about mental health at work, changing the culture around mental health, and empowering employees to take a call to action to seek resources and offer support to each other. One of the easiest ways to get involved is to sign the Let's Talk pledge and demonstrate your support for the campaign. By signing the pledge, you are pledging to recognize that mental health is an important component of overall health and well-being, make mental health a priority in the workplace, reach out to and support your colleagues, and speak out against mental health stigma. And now we will review some resources available for city employees. First, we have the New York City Employee Assistance Program. EAP provides education, information, counseling, and individualized referrals to assist with a wide range of personal and social difficulties. The contact information for EAP is listed here, and we encourage you to reach out to them. Be Well is another great resource. Be Well provides educational resources and wellness programming for city employees to help employees manage stress and develop resilience. Another great resource is NYC Well, which is available 24/7 and provides free and confidential mental health support for you or someone you care about. You can call, text, or chat by contacting the numbers listed here, and services are available in multiple languages. Lastly, the Health Benefits Program is another great resource. NYC Insurance Plans covers mental health services, so for more information or to find a provider, contact your insurance plan. A lot of great info has been shared today, so many of you may be wondering what else is next. I'd like to announce a few exciting events coming up. On August 5th, Project XYZ is hosting a virtual paint and sip. Project XYZ is a wellness initiative created by WorkWell NYC to deliver targeted programs, resources, and events to engage New York City's youngest employees. For this event, a list of suggested supplies is provided, and it is open to all regardless of previous painting or artistic experience. Next, on August 12th, as part of our Let's Talk webinar series, we are presenting Financial Fitness, Road to Retirement. This webinar is open to all city employees, regardless of how soon you may be planning to retire. In this webinar, we will discuss mentally preparing for retirement, the step-by-step process of retiring from the City of New York, maximizing and accessing retirement savings, and much more. You won't want to miss it. Once again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, the slides, webinar recording, and additional resources will be emailed to you all afterwards. Please stick around as our panelists, Carrie and Ebony, will now take some questions. You're invited to use the chat box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. So Carrie and Ebony, a question that we got earlier in the chat is, what are some strategies that you can do to stay motivated?
I think a good suggestion for staying motivated is making sure the action you're doing is in line with your values. So if we're doing things that align with our values, where we have a goal that we can keep in mind when we're accomplishing them.
Yeah, and to add to Ebony's comment is to make small steps, right? So I can speak to, like, when I have a goal and I know it's in line with my value, but I'm just down in the dumps, just sometimes the effort, the motivation is there, but the effort is not there. So what helps is to create small tangible steps that are attainable, and then that actually increases your motivation when you know that those mini successes are actually have happened. Anna, are the other ones, or you want me to go through them?
Yes, another question we have is, what are some strategies you do to feel regret?
You went in and out, Anna. Can you say that again?
Yes, I apologize. My internet has been having some difficulties lately. But one question we also received in the chat is, what are some ways that you can minimize feelings of regret?
So that's an interesting question. I think that that's like past feelings, and I wonder, you know, that's a very, very interesting question that I think, you know, regret can be a very heavy emotion, right? And I think that that could cause other levels of sadness, and you know, regret may often sometimes be that you did an action that may not have been part of your value system, right? So without knowing too much context, the very first thing that I would do is the very first steps that Ebony went through is do a healthy detachment from it, right? Like, okay, I'm having feelings of regret. I'm noticing these feelings of regret, right? And do those first steps. And then you may want to work with, a counselor or someone to work through the story of that and to kind of understand where those come from, and understand the why behind it in order to kind of tackle that and define it.
Great, thank you for that, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Another question we have is, what are some ways that you can reduce anxiety around doctor's visits, especially during COVID and when having other health challenges?
Everyone's anxiety is a little bit different, so it's really important to recognize, what helps us in the moment, so to keep and to utilize those tools when needed, and to do steps that we can to help protect ourselves. Even like how we get to doctor's office is important. Like, do we have to take the train? Can we take a car? And maybe that may be a helpful step to alleviate that anxiety, as well as talking with your doctor about, can we do a telehealth visit versus in person if needed, or the in-person's needed to minimize and talk to them about their own safety measures that they do within the hospital to keep the individual safe as well.
All right, thank you for that. And we have another question. What happens when your work responsibilities disagree with your values?
That is a tough one. I mean, I think we all can appreciate and understand that there's something that we have an obligation to do because it's part of our job, but there's a friction there, right? There's a struggle. So there's that struggle switch. And I think kind of, identifying that, again, going through the steps is like, oh, there's something that I have to do that, one, is probably not your choice, and two, is not in line. And, we have that at Eap where we kind of help, coach people through those conversations with either their supervisor or their work. And then there's some things that are within our control to shift and change, and then some things are not, and that's really tough. That there's some things in life that aren't in our control or in our ability to change, and those things is when, just like negative feelings, they are going to come up. There are going to be things like that in the workplace that aren't in line with you, and how can you take these steps to go through them while also taking effective change and responding to them in a way that follows your values in response to them, right? And an effective communication or being kind. I value being kind, so I'm going to talk to my supervisor with kindness, and I value this, so I'm going to respond to this with this value. So it's a little different approach, but that's something you can do.
All right, thanks, Carrie. And we have a question on what are some suggestions for creating a routine, especially when it is difficult for you?
I think it's really helpful. It's really helpful to know what works best for you. Like, are you a planner? Are you a scheduler? Do you want notifications on your phone versus, hard copy paper? And to develop what it would look like for you to have a routine that works with your remote schedule. What do you want to accomplish before work? I mean, that was usually our commute time. So thinking about in that time frame, like, do we want to have breakfast, or do we want to have some types of relaxation techniques? And to be able to be flexible, of course, throughout our day, but also to incorporate things that we know are helpful. It may be helpful to schedule time to stretch if we're finding it difficult to do it. That those time frames would be helpful to have them laid out in like a hard schedule or a notification on your phone. I mean, there are apps as well. I used to use them. I don't have them anymore. That would remind me every hour to stand up. Like some of our Fitbit watches do that as well. So there's looking at what you need in your schedule throughout the day and making sure it's all incorporated so you feel fulfilled.
Yeah, something Ebony said, and I agree, Ebony, that everyone is different. So there is, I'm not an organized person. So I have to figure out what structure means for me in order to be successful. So you really want to identify your strengths, your struggles, and your strengths, and identify, like, is the alerts make sense for you? Is lists make sense for you? And what kind of routine actually fits into your life first before you say, well, I have to do this, this, and that. I should be. In other words, like, I should have everything in order and I should have this routine. You should really have a routine that fits for you.
Thanks, Carrie and Ebony. Those were some really great suggestions. And we have another question. How can we communicate these ideas to children? And what are some resources for that?
How do you communicate these ideas in terms of kind of the 9 steps?
Yes.
Well, I can't say that I'm a child psychologist, as I'm not. But what I've discussed with colleagues is that it's the language parents use that's how people learn, right? So for instance, when you say, like, if a child is crying, and you say, well, what types of feelings are you having? Oh, you're having feelings of sadness, instead of saying, oh, you're sad, right? Like, so you can emulate or teach them these just by living them. I mean, kids are sponges. So that's at best. I'm not quite sure I don't know if there's any models of acceptance and commitment therapy for children under the age of, say, 12. I know this works very well with teenagers. There's ACT books out there for teenagers. If you go to newharbinger.com, it's a publishing company that publishes a lot of ACT books, and they have ACT for teenagers there. I'm not sure about younger than 12.
All right, and so we have 2 interesting questions that are kind of both related. One question is, how do you prevent your boss's anxiety from affecting you? And how can you protect your peace of mind? And then on the flip side, as a manager, how can you support an employee who's normally very positive, but they may be feeling sad or experiencing some emotional challenges?
Ebony, you want to start, or you want me to start?
I think, like, the first part of how to prevent your boss's anxiety from affecting you, similar to, I think, one of the steps 3 or 4, is like noticing what's happening. That is not your anxiety, that may be another person's anxiety, and for ourselves notice how it's affecting us so that we can know how to respond. And some of the techniques of grounding may be helpful to just be present in the moment of, like, even depending on how that conversation is taking place, either virtually or was it ever in person. How you sit and how you ground yourself could be helpful to remind yourself it's not you, that it is coming from an outside source, but it is affecting you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, I think we all, we all are different people. We all absorb people's emotions differently. And you do have to remind yourself, okay, this is not my emotion. This is them struggling. And we all, and try to seek compassion and empathy in it too. Is like, this person is struggling and I'm feeling it, and also taking care of yourself. How can I, some people are a little bit more absorbers, like, how can I take care of myself? Different ways, breathing techniques, or kind of doing something else that when you're taking on your boss's anxiety. Is there other self-care techniques that you can implement? And then the other question was the support. Yeah. Support of someone, of a staff member who's typically happy, right, Anna, and that she's struggling. I mean, there's very, very basic questions of, like, I'm noticing that you feel different. Is this anything that I can, just give a listening ear? How are you doing? Is there anything that you need from me? Just being a listening ear, honestly, can diffuse a lot. And not trying to solve the problem, right? If it's just being a listener and supportive, and one thing's called reflective listening, that's a very helpful technique. You just kind of reflect back what you're hearing from them. I know a lot of times we want to solve people's problems, but sometimes that actually most of the time doesn't really help. What helps is just allowing someone emotional space to share.
Carrie, the point you mentioned about reflexive communication sounds really interesting and very helpful for these situations. A similar question that we have is, what are some tips you can do to practice mindful communication? We have an attendee who says, sometimes I say things that are not the main point and I tend to get off tangent, especially when I'm feeling frustrated or anxious.
I mean, if someone's noticing for themselves, like the emotions that were listed at the end were like anxiety and frustrations coming up for them, to in those moments before they speak, a good rule, I think sometimes even for myself, is to, you know, take 3 seconds or 5 seconds before you speak to kind of get your thoughts, you know, in line before you say them out loud, so you know what's consciously coming out.
Yeah, I mean, the word that I can relate with Ebony saying is pause. So take a pause through each sentence. When we get that way, we're not even, if you notice, like I know if I'm in that element, I'm not even aware, right? You're not present, you're not mindful, obviously. But if I slow my cadence down, if I know I'm in some sort of like, oh, I'm stressed today, and I know that my struggle switch is easier to go on, because some days it's very easy to do that, I will try and slow down the way I speak, take a pause between sentences. That also slows down your heart rate, and it slows down your responses, and hopefully, ideally, will allow you to respond in a way that is in line with what you really want to say.
All right, thank you for that, Carrie and Ebony. And we have another question. Sometimes certain events or triggers really stop me, and I find it hard to even move forward. This doesn't happen often, but it does on occasion. What can I do when that happens?
Well, without knowing the specifics, I would kind of first look into the why. You know, when that's not a typical thing for someone, but it's particular events or situations, there's usually meaning behind them, right? So I would, you know, whether you want to work through that with a counselor or you want to just kind of be curious about it now, there's definitely something related to why those particular things stop you. So I would take an inventory and be curious about it. Again, go through the steps, be curious about it, take a look at it. Okay, this is stopping me. I want, you know, okay, I'm having these feelings. So you're almost investigate the process, and that in of itself can help diffuse the stopping you, and then kind of create an action plan when you do come to it, because then you're going to know what your value is and the why behind it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Carrie.
All right, so I've noticed that we have a couple of questions asking to repeat some of the steps. So I just want to let everyone know that the slides from today's webinar and the recording and any additional resources will be emailed to all of you afterwards. So if any of you joined in late, or maybe if you didn't get a chance to catch some of the information, we will be sending that to all of you. And there was also a question about, can parents and students use NYC Well? And the answer to that is yes. NYC Well is available to all New York City residents. All right, let's see.
Oh, Carrie, I noticed someone asked about the website you mentioned earlier, the Harvard.
Yes, I typed it in there. So it's a publishing company. It's not a specific site for teenagers. It's a publishing company that publishes books on acceptance and commitment therapy, and it has books that's specific for teenagers. So I'll type it again in the chat. And if you go to that website, you can search by books for teenagers, I believe. And you can also check on Amazon too. I think similar books, you might find the same book on Amazon as well.
Carrie, we have a question. Someone was asking for the information about the Eap Support Groups that you mentioned. Could you please recap that briefly for us?
Yes, so we have a number of support groups, and the one I mentioned was Monday nights at 8 p.m. And it's a relaxation technique group. Every week you're going to learn a different relaxation technique with one of our counselors, Michael Contreras. I think what I'm hoping is once everyone who registered, we're going to send out this information. Then on Tuesday nights, we have an 8 p.m. group for support group for people of color. That's at 8 p.m. from 8 to 9 with one of our supervisors, Vanessa Walton. And then on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., we have a group on grief and loss. We have a number of people who attend. Either they have gone through, they've lost people through COVID, or not even COVID, or grief and loss over something that is through their life. And then on Thursday nights, we have a support group that's in Spanish. Again, it's Michael Contreras from Monday night. And on Friday nights at 8 p.m., we have a group on resiliency. So kind of helping you identify internal resources and resiliency within you. What we can do is when Anna sends out the webinar, we can send out our group flyers because it'll have all the information on how to get in, the Zoom link. You can call in, you can Zoom in, you can chat, whatever you're comfortable with. And we can provide that to you. And it's every week. So every week we have an evening group on a different topic.
Thank you, Carrie. And we have another question, which I think many people will find very interesting. How do you deal with having issues of being vulnerable in front of people? For example, if normally you're the one that gives love and support to others, how can you confront being vulnerable and accepting that from other people?
Vulnerability is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for everyone, and just recognizing that is like the beginning step, I think, to trying to be more vulnerable. And choosing who we are vulnerable with is also, I think, very important. It's not something we do with everyone or even strangers, but we may have those trusted people in our lives that we are more comfortable with taking those steps to be more vulnerable. I love the author Brene Brown because she talks a lot about vulnerability. And I think it's a great book to do. Someone just posted about Brene Brown in the chat as well. And I think it's a great book to kind of explore it and see like how it shows up. And she gives great examples about how it shows up in relationships, how it shows up at work. Being conscious that you struggle with it, I think is step one.
Yeah, Ebony, you took what I was going to say. I wrote down Brene Brown.
Mm-hmm.
So being vulnerable, we've been taught and brought up, I mean, depending on your culture, right, that vulnerability may look like weakness, right? It's completely wrong, right? It's being vulnerable is actually a sign of bravery and strength, and that's actually what Brene Brown looks at too, is like vulnerability is a powerful, powerful tool. That we have to unlearn certain things that we've been taught about being vulnerable. And something that she said, that Anna, that you said, is that we are often there for people who are vulnerable and we don't judge them. They come to us and we have absolutely no judgment about them being vulnerable, but we have a hard time with it. So think about how you feel towards the people who are vulnerable. That's how people are going to be with you. They're not going to judge you. They're going to see it as brave and strong and open.
All right, thank you for your responses, Carrie and Ebony. So right now it is right at 2 o'clock. So maybe we can take one more question before we wrap up. If anyone has any questions, please submit those in the chat.
I wanted to make a comment. Someone's asking about the groups that we have. Please reach out to EAP via email. Our email is eap@olr.nyc.gov. Our number is 212-306-7660. Our counselors are available until 9 p.m. tonight, and we can definitely respond very quickly to questions about when our groups and send in the links for people who are interested in joining.
All right, so one final question. How can we keep the tips in mind that were discussed today when you're feeling completely exhausted or when you feel that you don't have the energy to keep track of all of this? What are some strategies for dealing with that?
I like old school. I like writing things down, having it available in your phone or as like a post-it, something that you can easily reflect on, that you don't have to think about, so that you can just look at it and acknowledge it.
Yeah, just keep it simple. If you don't have the energy, just do the first, you can just 2 steps. Okay, just be aware of your thoughts and just do some like kindness type of talking to yourself and allow yourself to feel, okay, I am feeling exhausted right now, and what's important to me. But just boil it down to being aware of what's going on and what's important to me. And let yourself, that turns off the struggle switch in some way without you having to go through like the 9 steps. And a lot of people are asking about the link for tonight's session. I am gonna, I think what we can try and do, Anna, were you gonna be able to possibly send out the group link for tonight's grief and loss group? I will.
Yes, we can send out those links.
Fantastic. So everyone, before this evening, we'll be getting the group flyer for our group this evening.
All right, so thank you everyone for attending. We had a lot of really great questions, and unfortunately, we're not able to get to all of them due to the limited amount of time, but we definitely encourage you all to reach out to EAP and any of the resources that we listed on the slides previously. Again, as a reminder, the slides and recording and additional resources about the EAP support groups will be sent to all of you afterwards. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Work Well event. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you to Carrie and Ebony for their great presentation as well.
You're so welcome.